unboxing the Birmingham Museum. I'm your host, Caitlin Donnelly, and each week we go into another storage area here at the Birmingham Museum, and we start opening up boxes and taking a look at what's inside. No one employee of the Birmingham Museum has opened up every single box because we have hundreds of thousands of items here at the museum that have been taken in for decades now. And so, it's always a fun surprise to go into places and just see what's there. So this week I am in our archives room, back upstairs at the Allen House. So we also have our CREEM collection stored in this room. Everything that's not currently on exhibit downstairs is in this room. So right now I'm standing in front of the shelving unit that contains our CREEM collection. I actually just moved the camera from one side of the room to the other. It's a pretty small room, so it's a little cramped if there's more than one person in here. Luckily it's just me. So here we have everything that's not on exhibit downstairs in our CREEM room. And I gotta say, I have a deep affection for the CREEM collection because when I started here 4 years ago, this was my first big project. Charlie Oranger, who our CREEM reading room is named after, we approached him because we wanted to explore a little bit more of the history of CREEM Magazine in Birmingham. So if you don't know, CREEM Magazine started in 1969 out of Midtown Detroit, what is now Midtown. And they started publishing it, and in 1973 they actually moved to Birmingham, and their offices were upstairs from the Birmingham Theater. So everyone knows where the Birmingham Theater is. Their offices were right upstairs, and so they shook things up a little bit in Birmingham. You'll still meet people to this day who didn't like CREEM then because there's a lot of long-haired kids suddenly wandering around downtown. They were blasting music. Rock stars were stopping by to get their photographs taken in downtown Birmingham. And some people really look back with a lot of nostalgia for that time period. A lot of people from Birmingham started working for CREEM, and that's how they got their entrance into rock and roll and rock journalism. So when I first got here, Charlie Oranger had just donated a bunch of his stuff from CREEM. Charlie was CREEM's art director from 1969 when they started to 1986 when the magazine was sold and it moved out to California. So he brought in not just magazines from his collection, he brought in the storyboards that he was using to lay out articles. He brought in his personal mementos from his time at CREEM, his notes that he was taking. He even donated some of the cameras that he used to take some of those really iconic shots from the cover. So just a really cool guy. We would not have this collection without him. And other CREEM staffers too, we've reached out to them. We have great working relationships with them. They've also donated quite a few things from their own personal collections. So it's really special. And so when I started, we just had this massive stuff, and everyone else had projects that they were in the middle of that they couldn't just drop and pick up this new thing. So I've always been a fan of classic rock, so Leslie assigned this to me. So I've read pretty much every single issue of CREEM Magazine. Super exciting. I think I know more about Kiss than Gene Simmons does. But then again, he lived it, so, who am I to throw shade? So we have just so many boxes here, and I'm responsible for putting 3/4 of these boxes on this shelf, so pretty proud of myself. It wasn't all fun and games. Some of it was, I did have questions, I did have struggles kind of working through accessioning some of this stuff, but I learned a lot, and now we have one of the biggest collections related to CREEM Magazine and a publicly held institution. So that's pretty awesome. So let's pick a random box and we'll go through and we'll take a look at what we can find. So this box here looks like it is related to Jan Uhelski, who was a rock critic and journalist that worked for CREEM. And there were very few women involved in rock journalism at that time. And she actually kind of used the patriarchy against itself because no one took her seriously. So she was able to get access to a lot of artists and musicians that male critics couldn't get to because no one took her seriously. They're like, oh yeah, you know, you want to go interview so-and-so, like that's fine. Like she got on stage with Kiss and performed with them. Like that's, I mean, she saw an advantage and she took it and used it to make a name for herself. And a lot of her interviews I really love. So I'm very grateful that she did that. So some of this is very personal stuff. So we have their envelope system that they were using to pay their bills. If you do any budgeting today, you might use a very similar envelope system. It's been advocated by a lot of, financial gurus. So, here's their consumer power envelope. Had to keep the lights on. And again, their Detroit Edison pay envelope. This is where they were keeping their payroll stubs. Their rent stubs, because again, you don't want to be evicted. You gotta pay your rent. Even if you're living that rock and roll lifestyle, you still gotta pay your rent, unfortunately. And these are really cool too. She and Charlie, while they were working together, they had a pretty close relationship. So here's a couple photos that Charlie took of himself, and he gave them to Jan. So really, he was a really talented photographer. I've done photography for many years. I worked as a professional photographer for a while, and I was just getting into it right when a lot of professionals were leaving the dark rooms and switching over to digital. And so I've done a little bit of darkroom work, and I have to say I really respect anyone who is working with that, because a lot of it is skill and knowing what you're doing and really taking the time to get it right, but some of it is also luck, So these are super well developed, and just from an artistic perspective, really great. And Charlie was a very handsome dude. So, and this one he actually put on a mat and he signed, "To Jan, with love and friendship, Charlie." And eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that I'm not wearing gloves today. And have I broken my own rules? Not really. So let me explain. A lot of people right now are probably pretty familiar with wearing gloves where they hadn't before. These last few months, a lot of people have been wearing latex gloves places, trying not to get or spread disease. And you might have noticed when you're wearing gloves, even if they're latex gloves and they fit pretty nice and close, your finger dexterity goes down. It's not quite what it was. So this happens to us in the museum and archive world too, particularly when you're dealing with paper. So books, magazines, letters, postcards, things of that nature. You don't want to accidentally tear things because you're slightly clumsier with your fingers. So the current standards that a lot of museums and archives use is to not wear gloves and just really ensure that your hands are nice and clean. So before I shot this, I went in the bathroom and I washed my hands for 20 seconds. I sang happy birthday a couple times. So my hands were nice and clean. And because I wasn't wearing gloves and slightly clumsier because of that, I didn't rip any of the paper artifacts that I handled today. So that is why. So, there are some exceptions to every single rule. So, yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We'll see you next time, and yeah, bye.